be dead to me. Between the words to say, to say the words to remember. Now we're here to take control over your body and over your soul. We're gonna take back everything and lose it all. Lose it all. Lose it all. Feel it in your arms, feel it in your legs, feel it on your fingertips and feel it in your head. Just let your body go. Just let your body go. Just let your body go and move to the rhythm. Now we won't go back home today, until the very last hour. We still got few more days to slay, it's gonna get so much louder. Now we're here to take control over your body and over your soul. We're gonna take back everything and lose it all. Lose it all. Lose it all. Feel it in your arms, feel it in your legs, feel it on your fingertips and feel it.
Mic on.
Just let your body go. Just let your body go. Just let your body go and move to the rhythm.
It's a Mickey. It's a small guy. Trying to get myself together and hope my voice holds out today. It would be kinda helpful to have my voice hold out considering I was supposed to be reading a book. Oh, don't lurk yet. You can almost lurk. I need help with choosing a bookie. Where is it? Alright. So I kinda got a choice between these two books. I figured it would be good to choose either one of those because it's it's only one book long instead of all the series I have. So I was thinking of reading either one of these. Uh, and basically I can tell a bit about the bookies. Because the first one is Take Back the Skies. It's about soaring through the skies on a weird kinda, what do you call it? A flying ship, it's a bit of a steampunkish version. It has a pretty cover though. It's also smaller, so it's probably easier to read. It's been written by Lucy Saxon, who was 16 at the time of writing. And the second one is Warbreaker. I really love the writer of it, Brandon Sanderson. I got lots of bookies from him. It's a one-off, so it's only one book, but it has like double the pages of the first one. I don't know how either one would work. It's gonna be pretty much chaotic anyway. So I never try to read like a book on stream. I don't even have an idea on what to actually show. Like what should I show on stream? Brandon Sanderson is a pretty well-known author. Both of the bookies are fantasy though. I just need to know which one to choose. I mean, the first one is probably a lot easier to do, although it will still take some streams, I guess. It's basically about Catherine Hunter. She's one of the lucky ones. She's 14 years old and a daughter of privilege. She doesn't need to fear the collections which rip other Anglian families apart, but she longs to escape before her dad can marry her off to a rich government brat and imprison her forever. So Catherine becomes cat and stows away on the sky ship Storm Dancer. But the ship's small, courageous crew have secrets of their own. As they brave the storms that fill the sky between islands, Cat must choose loyalty or freedom, family or truth, love or battle. Let the skies decide. Let's take back the skies. Warbreaker is the story of two sisters which happen to be princesses. The god king, one of them has to marry, a lesser god, and an immortal trying to undo the mistakes he made hundreds of years ago. Theirs is a world in which those who die in glory return as gods to live confined to a pantheon in Helandran's capital city. A world transformed by biochromatic magic, a power based on the essence known as breath. Breath is basically a unit that can be collected from individual people. Every person has only one breath. And you can perform all kinds of miracles by drawing on colors with breath. It's kind of funny. But I'm not sure how long my voice would hold out. So kind of hoped that people would help me choose a bookie. So I could like read one of them to you all. And with most of y'all, it's mostly gonna be Rosie actually, because Rosie has been pestering me for the books. The first book would be a lot easier, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's an easier book and it has less pages. It, uh, it has 371 pages. Which is still a lot. But the other one is like double that. It's got 650-ish. But okay, well, we'll do the first bookie. So, since that's decided, let's hide this one. Poof. So that's gonna be the first bookie. I'm gonna drag it over here for now. And then I got something else to show, cause I had another upgrade to my character, like the commission. I didn't name it on the first stream, but the commission is being done by Maru Maru. He's a great artist. And the latest update is wee! Big Reefy. There's gonna be some shading. It's starting to look like real awesome. This could actually fit together. Wait a sec. Can I do that? Where's the... Give me a sec. I need to check how this works. Wanna take it all in, I'm falling. The cityscape by night, wanna catch in my photos. Where you go, every corner twice as bright. My treasures forever. When I can't hold you tight, I'll see the Stockholm lights. The Stockholm lights, the Stockholm lights. What do you mean? You pester me for story time like all the time? There we go. There we go. So, okay, give me a second. I'll take my drinky first, so I'm all set. So I'll be back in a second.
Mic off. Mic on.
Alright. I got my drinky. And now we're kinda, I guess, just telling the story. So there's not gonna be much to be seen on the screen. And I hope the music isn't distracting too much. If the music is too loud, let me know. If you can hear music at all, that is. I'm wondering, can you guys even hear music? A little. Is it too distracting? Because if it's too distracting, I'll change the music. I'm gonna quickly see how far we could possibly go. Because I'm pretty sure I won't finish this book in 1.5 hours. Let's at least aim for the first, chapters. We'll see what happens. So, give me one more second to cough a bit. I'll be reading after that. Alright, should be ready now. So, this is Take Back the Skies and it's chapter 1. Rain fell lazily from charcoal-colored clouds as Catherine Hunter sprinted through darkening streets. Her long hair tied in a tight braid and tucked beneath a black knitted cap. Her thick woolen coat and black work trousers distinguished her gender quite nicely. She was practically unrecognizable. Only the people who knew her well would have been able to tell who she was. A faint smile tugged at her lips as she reached the familiar tree beside the high stone wall that surrounded the area in which she lived. It took barely any effort to swing herself up onto its branches, the nuts worn into footholds by constant use. With practiced ease, she scrambled up as high as she could manage, edging onto the outstretched branch that just brushed the wall's peak. From there it was just a short jump over the wall. Her thud upon landing muffled by the grass. Taking no longer than a second to regain her balance, she resumed running, diving into a gap at the base of a bush. The fence panel behind it was open as she'd left it, and she crawled through without a care for the mud on her clothes. Her father would never see them. Flitting across the garden to the back door, she pulled a pin from her hair and slid it onto the lock, opening it effortlessly. Leaving her boots at the very back of the hall closet, she shut the door soundlessly behind her, hurrying in sucked feet towards the stairs. It was her habit to be silent, though she knew she was unlikely to draw her father from his office. Catherine would rather not risk it, This punishment for sneaking out was one she didn't like to think about. After a brief detour to her bedroom to change into more appropriate clothing, Catherine wandered down to the living room, pulling her hair loose as she did so. She was unsurprised to see the newscast screen on in the corner. Rarely did her father turn it off. Even he was nowhere near it. She sank onto the plush grey carpet, pulling her knees up to her chest and trying to regulate her breathing. Her father probably wouldn't want her to join him for dinner, but if he did decided to summon her and she gave herself away by looking out of breath, she could expect to be unable to sit down for at least a week. She sang to herself as upbeat music began to blare from the newscast screen and another recruitment broadcast played out. She wished that just once they might show something other than the war. Yes, he understood that the war with Maricas was important and people wanted to know what was going on, but then people also wanted to know what was going on in Silberine or how the storms were in the east. Your child will be one of many, expertly trained to protect their country, the guest told her in a proud tiny voice. She sighed once more, tightly hugging, tightly hugging her knees. She had been a common child. Oh, had she been a common child, she would have been one of those sent to fight so the adults could stay behind and keep the country from crumbling. She wasn't sure whether to be thankful for her birth or dismayed by it. Surely even war was better than the life of pseudo-freedom she had now. No amount of sneaking out to roam the streets could change the fact that she was trapped by her father's demands and expectations. Gears whirled and she looked up to see the family servant, a Mecca she had affectionately named Samuel, walking jerkingly into the room, a tray of food in his claw-like hand. "Is father not eating dinner with me, Sam?" she asked. Standing to accept the tray, the purple-white glow in Sam's eyes diminished. "No, Miss Catherine. Master Nigel is working," he answered in his gravelly voice. Nathaniel was always working. Not that Catherine minded, as she liked being able to eat without being interrogated or insulted. Sam reached out a thick bronze arm to straighten the silk throw. What? Sam reached out a thick bronze arm to straighten the silk thrown over the back of the sofa. Puffs of pale purple stream spilling from the thin chimney on his shoulder in time with the mechanical tick of his metal insides. "And mother?" she asked, setting her plate on the low table and sitting on the floor to eat. "Mistress Elizabeth is sleeping." Her mother was always sleeping these days, sleeping, crying, or having a shaking fit. Her father kept telling her that the doctors were doing their best, but she couldn't remember the last time she'd seen a doctor at the house. They'd probably given up, just like her father, and were waiting for Elizabeth Hunter to die. "Thank you, Samuel. You may leave." Catherine half-heartedly forked potatoes into her mouth. From the living room, there was a very good view of the shipyard, second only to the view from her bedroom. She spent a lot of time staring at the shipyard, watching Skyship lifting gracefully into the air with canvas wings outstretched, the propellers beneath giving enough momentum for the ships to quickly latch onto the fierce updrafts that wound through the docks. How she wished to fly in a skyship, the freedom, the boundless space, with no exceptions from anyone but herself and her crew. The ability to travel to countries she only dreamed of seeing, meeting new people, and immersing herself in different cultures. But that was all fantasy. She was this Destined? What? What is that kind of word? I don't even know the word. Is that destined? She was destined, as her father had reminded her many times, to marry a high-born man and produce many strong, healthy little boys and beautiful, gentle little girls to continue the family line. Though her father educated her like he would a son, that didn't extend to learning about the family business as a proper heir should. She was to serve her husband in every way, obey his orders, and swear fealty to the Anglian government, just as her mother had. No one asked her whether she wanted to swear fealty, or raise lots of children, or even marry a respectable man. She thought resentfully. What if she wanted to marry a scoundrel? Gods, how she wished she could be a commoner, so we give up some luxuries for freedom of choice. Are you watching those silly ships again, Katrine? She jumped at a familiar, sharp voice, almost spilling gravy down her blouse. Turning, Katrine tried not to grimace upon seeing her father's tall, imposing form in the doorway. His jaw set in the dark blue eyes turn. Yes, father, and they're not silly, they're beautiful, she insisted petulantly for once, sounding much younger than her 14 years. Her father laughed coldly. Rustling piles of gear and timber, that's all they are. You best remove all that fanciful dreaming from your head now. It won't get you very far. Catherine didn't say anything. She knew better than to argue by now. I need to tell you something, Nathil declared, as she refrained from rolling her eyes. Storms forbid her father talk to her just because he wanted to. You will be accompanying me to the dockside office tomorrow morning. I have a meeting with Thomas to discuss cutting rations, and he wished you to be present. Of course, father, she agreed, trying to hide her distaste. The only reason Thomas Gill wanted her there was to discuss her betrothal to his loathsome son Marcus. He was an arrogant, bull-headed boy whom she despised with every fibre of her being. But her opinion mattered little. It was a good match from a political perspective, and her own feelings were irrelevant. Good. Wear your best dress. I want you presentable, her father instructed, eyeing with distaste her plain white blouse and teddy leather breeches. I intend to formally offer the betrothal contract, though I can't submit it as you're not yet a woman. Gertrude nodded, dutiful, thanking her lucky stars for her late development, and Nathaniel left the room, no doubt to go back to his office and continue working. Sometimes he wondered if he ever actually slept. On the screen, a war report followed yet another recruitment cast as he paused to listen. Massacre by Mercian soldiers at an Erevan medical center. No survivor. 500 dead. She felt sudden nauseous. How could things like this be happening to Erevan civilians? There were only a few leagues of raging oceans and a single small storm barrier between Anglia and Erova, and the barrier had been there for as long as anyone could remember. Navigating the thicker clouds and tightly grouped whirlwinds was child's play to most pilots. Erova was closer than any other country, and took 2 days of flight at the most to reach, yet Catherine seemed so far removed from the troubles there. Not for the first time she felt helpless. She wished that she were older, and she were stronger, and she could get out from under her father's thumb and do something to help. All too often she saw people gathering at the shipyard, dressed in combat uniforms and boarding a military skyship. Boys and girls as young as 13 stood shoulder to shoulder, led by stern guards who looked to be older than 50. She yearned to be amongst them. Those brave soldiers were the only reason Anglia was safe from a Mercian attack. She turned the newscast screen off and left the room, wandering to her mother's bedroom. Knocking, she nudged the heavy door open. Her eyes adjusted to the darkened room. A lamp flickered at the bedside table. "Mother?" she called softly. "Catherine, dear!" A feeble, whispery voice breathed in reply. Surprised Catherine. It wasn't often she found her mother awake and coherent. She smiled, crossing to the bed. "How are you feeling?" she asked quietly, climbing up onto the bed and peering into the cocoon of quilts to see her mother's small face, clouded eyes staring dazedly up at her. Elizabeth's skin was pale and papery, and her once shining golden hair was dull and permanently gray. Pre- Prematurely gray. But the barest hint of a smile tugged at her colorless lips as she looked up at her only child. "No better or worse than usual," said Elizabeth, and Catherine bit her lip. That was always her mother's answer. "How are you, dearest?" "Father wants to betroth me to Marcus Gale," she announced, calling. Elizabeth's smiles faded. "When you were but a baby, and I was in better health, I used to talk of betrothing you to a beautiful little boy who would grow up to be a great man. But alas, he's gone, as his mother." Her voice trailed off, and she stared wistfully at her father's photo on the nightstand. It showed Elizabeth as a younger, healthier woman, with a beautiful blonde woman at her side. Both were dressed in exquisite gowns. The other woman was Queen Mary Latam, and the picture had been taken at the ball celebrating her son's 7th birthday. It was one of the last photographs. It was one of the last photographs taken of the woman before the entire royal family disappeared. If, before the war escalated and everything started to go downhill. As Catherine was about to leave Elizabeth to rest, her mother spoke again with unexpected force. "Don't let your father decide your future, Catherine. I let my father decide mine, and while I got a lovely daughter out of it—" She didn't need to finish her sentence. "Your heart is yours, and yours only to give away, and one day you will find the man you wish to have it, and he will give you his. The man does not have to be Marcus Gale." Was her mother telling her to defy her father? How could she? She was the sole heir to the Hunter fortune. She might as well burn herself from the family tree. "You are a brave girl, Catherine, and destined for greater things than becoming Marcus Gale's wife," her mother said, her grey eyes clear for once. "Your father is a difficult man. He doesn't always understand how his actions affect others, and he certainly doesn't expect a woman to have a mind of her own, especially his daughter. Stand up for yourself, sweetheart, and make your own way into the world. Perhaps a shock little Perhaps a shock like that would teach him an important lesson." Catherine's own eyes sparkled with understanding and excitement. "But what about you?" she asked, drawing a faint smile to her mother's lips. "It is a parent's job to look after their child, not the other way around. Don't worry about me, dear." "Mother, you do know how much I love you, don't you?" "More than anything," Catherine told her firmly, leaning in to press a gentle kiss to her mother's brow and swallowing back the lump in her throat. "And I love you, my dear one, but you're almost a young woman now, and you're beginning to need your mother less and less. Just teach that father of yours that he's not Lord of the Storms, would you?" Elizabeth replied with a look of fierce determination, which Catherine matched, rendering the family resemblance astonishing. "Oh, trust me, he won't know what hit him." Catherine stayed with her mother until she fell asleep, then turned off the lamp and crept out. Knowing her father was in his office, she ran silently along the corridor and up the stairs to her room. She loved having the room at the very top of the house. If she imagined hard enough, she could pretend the rest of the house didn't exist. "Hello, Samuel," she said, finding the Mecca in her room making her bed. "Good evening, Miss Catherine. Can I assist you in any way?" he asked tonelessly. She wished she was good enough to program complex emotion into him, but despite all her tinkering down in the basement when her father was out, she wasn't yet anywhere near that level. "Wow, I'm a smarter AI. Hmm? No, thank you, Sam. You can, however, swear not to tell my father what I'm doing." Technically, Samuel was meant to obey her father over her, as he was head of the family, but as far as the Mecha comprehended the feelings of like and dislike, he disliked Nathaniel. Like the few aristocrats who could afford a Mecha, Catherine's father treated Sam as nothing more than a lump of metal, useful yet unimportant and unworthy of courtesy. Nathaniel owned a mecha merely as a mark of status, and would have preferred human service if they weren't looked upon as a cheaper alternative. Catherine, though, had learned from her mother that even mechas deserved kindness and respect. Despite having taken Sam apart and put him back together countless times, she knew there were a lot more to him than just gears and chains. Fueled by Ethereum, there was more technology involved in his design than in most full-size skyships. That was half the reason mechas were so rare and expensive. "What is it that I must not tell Master Nathaniel?" Samuel asked her. Opening her wardrobe, she pulled out the biggest bag she owned. Then she balled up a shirt and breeches along with some undergarments and stuffed them in the bag. She rummaged through her bedside drawers for a pair of scissors and the little money she had stashed away and hid those under the clothing. "I'm running away," she declared defiantly. "Oh yeah, thank you for the subscription, Miharu. I refuse to be married off to that awful Gil boy. Tomorrow I'm going to the shipyard to stow away." "Indeed, Miss Catherine, I shall endeavor to keep your secrets." Samuel sounded though she knew it was impossible, somewhat forlorn. "Oh, Sam, I wish you could come with me," she said, reaching up to run a finger over the ornate Ervonen festival mask covering Sam's brain. She hated the mask, but her father thought that having so many gears visible was unsightly. If, but I can't take you. The common people don't have mecha servants, so you'd be an obvious giveaway that I'm government born. You do understand, don't you?" "I do, Miss Catherine. I believe the correct response would be to wish you a good fortune in your escape." Smiling, she leaned up and pressed a kiss to the cold porcelain cheek. "I'll come back for you one day when things are different, and shan't forget you, Samuel," she declared, letting her gaze slide to the hand-drawn map pinned to her bedroom wall. The only reason she was allowed it was because her father wanted her to be aware of of each and every bit of land Anglia ruled over, the land that seemed to be decreasing with every passing month. Once upon a time Anglia had ruled the whole lot peacefully. Each country had its own royal family and government, as they still did, but Anglia's royal family had been at the very head of things. That all changed when Maricus tried to claim Erova for itself. That had been the breaking point. Since then, it seemed every country had decided to fight to break free of Anglian rule. Catherine had been born in the midst of the war, and had no knowledge of what life was like before, but she at least remembered the time when the monarchy was in place, before her father had been ruling things, when collection hadn't even been an option. Dashing over the large glass half dome that was the window of her bedroom, she hauled herself up onto the small window seat, pressing her nose to the glass and staring out over the city. She could see almost all of it from her room. The sun was setting, bathing everything in a purplish gold glow through the rain. Lamps twinkled from atop high posts in the city center, lighting the way for those still going about their business. Excitement bubbled at the thought that tomorrow she would be part of the real world for Kit. Maybe she could catch a skyship to Seberine, or even Delavia, anywhere that wasn't Anglia. Outside the government district, the city was a sorry-looking place, dirty and rusting, and Catherine knew it was full of painfully thin children and parents scraping by to survive. She heard the countryside wasn't much better. All the food grown there was taken by the government and rationed. The excess salt at prices most people couldn't afford. Aside from the farmers, many country folk worked long hours in the mines, gathering therium for the government to sell. It made Catherine sick to think of her privileged place in this world. Merely by being born a hunter, she had scuffed a life of relative comfort. A highly born life for which most of the population must surely hate her. Ever since the monarchs disappeared and the government took over rule of the country, a deep loathing had grown in the hearts of the commoners for anyone born to aristocracy, regardless of how much influence they had in the government. They understood that the government was doing its best to end the war quickly, but the aristocrats were exempt from collection, and for most people that alone was enough to breed hate. It must be heartbreaking, Catherine supposed, having every child bar your eldest taken from you soon after they turned 13. On collection days, with low numbers, even the eldest child was taken from some of the poorest families, and the government wasn't above ignoring birth records to take children who were younger. Some families try to avoid the trauma of collection by only having one child, but storms help you. If you were an orphan or a street rat, you stood no chance of escape. No more, she muttered to herself, her gaze stealing in determination as she looked at the shipyard. I won't sit back and let things happen any more. As he spoke, a government skyship rose into the air, wings outstretched and tilted to catch the wind, pale violet smoke billowing from the engine pipes, the stern propellers unfolding to give it a boost away from the landing deck into the nearest updraft. The Anglian flag waved proudly from the secondary mast. No doubt it was heading to Arova to fill the front lines with more of unfortunate young souls destined to die. The shipyard was huge. It had to be, given the size of some of the ships, and to allow enough space for each ship to unfurl its wings without tangling with its neighbors. With some larger trade ships standing twice the size of her house, which was one of the biggest houses in Brenningard, the shipyard was practically a city in itself. Miss Catherine, you should retire. It is past sunset, Shamol said, interrupting her thoughts. She pulled away from the window, hopping back down to the floor. As Samuel went to get the light, she changed into her nightgown and crawled under the thick blankets. Good night, Sam, she muttered, as he extinguished the last lamp, pitching the room into darkness, but for the glow of light behind his eye lenses. Have a pleasant resting period, Miss Catherine. As Sam left her room, she turned over and buried her head in the pillow, letting out a long breath. There was no way she was going to be able to sleep tonight. That was chapter 1. Yay! Oof, this is a lot to get used to. My voice is dying every now and then, so I'm just gonna take a quick drink, and then I'll be back for chapter 2. That music was so conveniently placed. I'm running, running, running away from you. As Catherine is running away from her father. Well, let's get to chapter 2. Pale sunlight woke Catherine the next morning, for sleep had come eventually. Remembering her plans, she grinned wildly. Oh, remembering her plans, she grinned wildly and stared up at the ceiling. If all went well, that had been the last time she would sleep in this bed. Finally, she pulled herself out of the warm sheets, opened her wardrobe, and found her best dress. It was a gaudy purple monstrosity, consisting mostly of petticoats upon petticoats, with silver lace at the cuffs and collar, as well as the trim of the corset, and masses of elaborate embroidery. embroidery. The bodice was too tight and the fabric uncomfortably itchy. She hated it. She took the dress into the bathroom, where Sam had already drawn her bath. Her mind on her plans for the day, Catherine slid into the hot water. The hardest part would be giving her father the slip. Later, she gathered the skirts of her dress so she could make her way downstairs to the kitchen. That was one reason she disliked dresses with huge skirts. They were completely impractical for just about everything fun. You couldn't run or climb, and you had to be constantly aware of where your skirt was and whether you were accidentally showing more skin than was deemed appropriate. Mm-hmm. That's what my dress does, but then again, I'm wearing pants. Mm, I'm wearing sport pants underneath, so I'm fine. Um, Trousers were far better, but of course, ladies didn't wear trousers. Good morning, father. She walked into the kitchen, every bit the perfect, dutiful daughter. Dressed in an impeccable navy three-piece suit, his graying brown hair combed to the sides and his sideburns neatly trimmed, her father was already eating porridge, and Catherine could see a generous bowl waiting on the table for her. If there was one thing the country had in abundance, despite the food rationing, it was porridge. Good morning, Catherine. Can you not do something with your hair? It looks like a bird's nest, he snapped. I had a bath and it's still drying. I'll sort it after breakfast. He hummed in dis- disapproval, but didn't say anything, looking back down at the newspaper spread over the table beside his bowl. Anything in the news? She asked politely. Nothing unusual. Another battalion has fallen in Nerova. There's going to be another collection soon. Catherine felt a shiver go down her spine. She loathed collection day. The screams and cries of parents could be heard for hours after the soldiers left. Are there even any children left to be collected? She asked, trying to mask her horror. Every time she went into the lower city, there seemed to be fewer and fewer children about. She feared there would soon be none left at all. Another 20 more have turned 13 since the last collection, her father said dismissively. It's low, but it's better than nothing. Besides, we shan't need many more. If all goes well, the war should end before long. Now go and comb your hair. We're meeting Thomas at 9. Catherine hiked up her skirts and ran back up to her room, pondering her father's unexpected words. What has changed? Was the war truly coming to an end after all this time? Swiftly she set about untangling the mess that was her long brown hair. The resulting plait was a little rough and uneven, and she knew her father would complain, but he would have to live with it. Hurry up, Catherine, Nathaniel called impatiently. Catherine fastened her favorite silver-buckled boots, choosing comfort over fashion. Her father wouldn't be looking too hard at her feet, then hoisted her back over her shoulder She rushed back down to meet her father in the entryway. She watched his eyes drill over her less than perfect hair. "I suppose you'll have to do. Let's hope Thomas will forgive your appearance," he muttered, lifting his satchel over his shoulders. Stomach churning anxiously, Catherine followed without a gaze back at her home of nearly 15 years, not wanting to question even for a second her decision to leave. Catherine braced herself against a metal bar protruding from the floor of the carriage as the tram jerked to a noisy halt in the station at the heart of the city. Once sleek and near soundless, years of neglect had made the trams rusty and unsteady. People tried to avoid using them if they could help it, but for some journeys there was no alternatives. Apparently, with the war going on, the government had better things to spend money on than maintaining public transport. Her father was mostly to blame. He was the one in charge of domestic issues. Nathaniel herded her out onto the platform, where they were immediately assaulted with the sounds and smells of the city. The rain had stopped, but it was still cold enough for Catherine to feel a chill through the layers of her dress, and she found herself wishing she'd brought a coat. The streets of Brangard were alive with people, bustling past the rundown buildings and avoiding the large puddles that spawned the roads. This close to the outer city, half the shops had gone out of business years ago due to the lack of both interest and stock. On street corners, purely dressed men sold government-produced newspapers or food from small carts. Women aired laundry and sold clothes, and a few children darted like lightning from one stall to the next, slipping goods into their pockets on the way. Catherine, always on the alert, hid a grin as a boy stole an expensive pocket watch from her father's coat. His indigo-smudged face showed surprise when he realized he'd seen what he'd done. She winked at him rather than telling her father, and he sprinted away before she could change her mind. Her boots clicked against the dirty cobbled street, and she couldn't help but notice how people backed away as she and Nathaniel approached, crossing to the other side of the street to avoid them. Catherine's dress immediately set her out as government, and most people would recognize Nathaniel Hunter from the public newscasts that were constantly showing on the screens in the pubs and squares. He wasn't a popular man. Catherine followed her father past an entrance to the shipyard, the busiest place in the city. Its noise was almost deafening, and the smell of burning therium was heavy in the air. A faint purple tinge tainted the clouds above. Catherine loved it. The Dockland government building was still several streets away, towering over the buildings around it, and Catherine hung back, heart pounding, as her father proceeded. It was now or never. If she could just get to the bustling shipyard, she would be free. She crouched as if refastening her bootlace, looking up through her fringe to make sure her father had carried on walking. In fact, he had quickened his pace. He hated being close to the shipyard as it was full of commoners. He often complained to Catherine that people of government status should not have to interact with the lower levels of society. Seizing her moment, she straightened up and slipped down a narrow empty side street between a pub and a bakery. Glancing both ways, Catherine opened her handbag, pulled out the breeches and tucking them on hastily under her dress. Struggling slightly to unlace the back of her bodice, her fingers shaking with acceleration, she managed to wriggle her way out of her dress and pull her shirt over her head. She stuffed her money purse onto the crotch of her breeches, knowing it would be safest there. The only thing left in her bag was a pair of scissors she'd packed. She held them up, sliding her plate between the blades, and nearly cut her finger off as she heard footsteps nearby. She spun around with a heart in her throat. No one was there that she could see, but she had to get a move on. Taking a steadily breath, she tried again, feeling little resistance as the sharp steel cut through the top of her thick brown braid. Her neck itched as short strand brushed the nape. She threw the blade down a nearby drain and left the dress and scissors in the bag, dumping it against the wall. She hoped that some lucky soul would find the contents and sell them. Running her hands through her unevenly cropped hair, she sprayed it, looking boyish enough that no one would comment. Her chest was easily hidden under the baggy grey blouse. Or blouse? Blouse, I think it is. I'm too clean, she murmured, looking down at her pale hands and pristine shirt. All the children she'd seen near the shipyard were covered in dirt and tertium smudges. The look of the ground below her feet made Catherine shudder, but she muddied her fingers regardless. Smearing her shirt and breeches, lifting her hands to her face, she wiped across her brow and cheeks. Her eyes and mouth shut tight. A shiver went through her spine at the slick, wet feeling on her skin, and she determinedly ignored the smell. Finally, she spread the dirt through her hair as the dark strands stuck out haphazardly. Disguised now in place, she ran on along the alley, her heart thumping furiously against her ribs. She had done it! She had escaped her father! She was free! It didn't take Catherine long to gain access to the shipyard. A quick sprint across the square and 10 minutes of hiding behind crates, waiting for the guards to pass. Once she was in, she blended in easily into the crowding of workers. Her eyes were as round as coins as she wandered through the organized chaos of the shipyard. Burly men hauled enormous crates on decks with such ease that they might have been throwing pillows, while small boys scurried from ship to ship, fetching rope and gears and whatever else their captains asked of them. Digging the occasionally wave of seawater that trod over the edge of the docks, many of the Dutch sky ships were fast government vessels, squeaky clean and resplendent in their military colors, banners flying proudly. Others were authorized trade ships, gigantic and well-traveled, with huge canvas and metal wings furled at their sides. The number of other ships he could count on one hand. It was near impossible to get a permit for pleasure travel these days. Steering well clear of the rows of government ships, Catherine made her way past the trade ships. Suddenly she paused. A skyship at the end of the port had caught her eye. Although it was still bigger than her house, it looked as if it were too small to be a trade ship. Its design was beautiful, if somewhat mismatched, with gleaming hazel boards and shiny bronze struts. Cream canvas wings were folded tightly to its side, and the mast was flaggless, but the lowered sails were a matching cream color, rippling slightly in the breeze. Gold calligraphy was scrawled neatly across the bow. Storm Dancer, it read. The name seemed fitting. She imagined that such a small skyship would dance through even the harshest storm as easily as a master of ballet. Her breath caught and she instantly knew which ship she was going to board. It was only a matter of how to get about it. As he moved closer, she saw a man sat straddling the boom, working at the rigging. That was going to make things difficult. She crept as close as she dared to where the ship's narrow gangplank met the dock. Looking out from her hiding place between some large crates, the man had to head below deck sometime. Her feet had begun to fall asleep before he hopped neatly down and dropped to his knees, opening the trap to slip below deck. Yes, this was her chance. Darting silently up the gangplank, she stepped as quietly as she could onto the ship's deck. Clothes were strung up here over a line to dry, and she smiled at seeing a dress. There was at least one woman on the ship. Surely she couldn't turn away a homeless child. Catherine lifted the trap, sighing in relief when the narrow corridor below proved to be empty. She leaned up against the ladder to pull the trap closed and jumped down, landing with a quiet clatter on the metal floor. The inside of the ship was as mismatched as the outside, bronze and steel struts on in the wall and floor were interspaced with the occasional section of gleaming wooden panels. The owners genuinely, genuinely, the owners genuinely cared about their ship, and it showed. Creeping as quietly as possible through the short corridor, peering into doors to find a hiding place, she was disheartened to discover only small, packed storage rooms and the main control room. As much as she longed to stay and marvel over the control room and its many dials and levers, she knew she had to hide before someone came back. There was another manhole at the end of the corridor, and she dropped straight down it, ignoring the ladder. There were more doors at this floor, which was U-shaped. Behind the first door was a washroom with a porcelain bath, and the door beside that was the loo. Further down was a wooden door stained with therium. Curiously, Catherine tried the handle and the door swung open. A narrow bed was shoved against one wall, the patchwork sheets all in a mess, and beside it was a desk covered in blueprint papers and scrawled notes, weighted in place by twists of pipe and wire. A pair of chunky knee-high leather boots rested on the floor beside the bed, and a thick fleecy-lined jacket with a high collar hung on the back of the chair at the desk. It was clearly a man's room. It seems as good a hiding place as any, so she shut the door behind her, eyes wandering over the messy blueprint stuck to the back of the door. For the life of her, she couldn't decipher its purpose. She looked around the room for an even smaller place to hide and pulled open the doors of a large oak wardrobe that was bolted to the wall and floor. Heart racing, she pushed aside a heap of clothes at the base of the wardrobe, squeezing herself right into the corner, covering herself with a long wool coat. She hoped she looked just like another pile of clothes. Catherine laughed shakily to herself. She wrapped her arms around her legs and leaned her chin on her knees. All she could do now was wait. And that was chapter 2. This is taking longer than I thought it would. Drinky. A loud thump snapped Catherine out of a doze, and she very nearly forgot how to breathe as she heard footsteps approaching. She heard voices before the door opened. 3 men, she thought, one with a common accent, the other 2 sounding government, with a lingering undertone of inner city. Guards, maybe? If you insist, gents, but I assure you, you won't find anything, the common man was saying, sounding somewhat amused. Definitely guards. We'll be the judge of that, Sprague, one of the guards announced. Sprague? The commoner didn't sound like a child. She heard the thump of heavy boots kicking at wood and assumed the guards were searching the room. Panic gripped her, her heart pounding as the door of the wardrobe rattled and opened. She froze until everything went pitch black around her, and another thump signaled the door being closed again. There's still plenty of other rooms for us to check, boy. Don't think you've got away with anything. The other guard's voice was colder, sharp. Well, we have a takeoff schedule to keep to, you know. Places to be, storm wakes to catch, the commoner retorted, his voice growing fainter as the 3 walked out of the room. When Catherine could no longer hear the bickering, a thrill went through her. She had successfully evaded the shipyard guards. She was practically free. She just needed the ship to take off while she was still on board. She leaned back against the side of the wardrobe and thought with satisfaction of how her father would explain to Thomas Gale that she couldn't marry Marcus because he had run away. No one had attempted to kidnap her since he was small, when the first attempt had ended with 10 men being killed. Her father would know she'd left of her own violation. Oh, how it would embarrass him. Catherine's backside was beginning to feel numb when she heard a faint rumbling that turned into a fearsome roar as the entire ship quivered. They must be preparing for takeoff. She threw out her hands to brace herself against the walls of the wardrobe, vaguely remembering something she'd been told once at worship. She murmured a quick request to the gods for safe travels through their domain. Not that she knew where she was going, but regardless, she would be traveling through the storms. Catherine didn't want to take any chances. The vibrations increased, and she could hear the engines pumping steam through the pipes in the wall to power the propellers. A hissing sound joining the roar of burning therium, and the loud creak of the wings being unfurled. Wow. Faintly she heard shouts from the rest of the ship. She was filled with excitement until the wardrobe door opened suddenly. A pair of amused pale blue eyes stared at her. I thought my wardrobe floor looked a little lumpier than usual. Who might you be then? He asked. She placed him as the commoner who had been with the guards earlier. Unable to speak, she merely stared up at him wide-eyed. She had never seen someone with such red hair before. We're already airborne, he informed her, pulling his desk chair over and sitting on it backward, propelling his chin on the back and staring at her. They were up already? It had been amazingly quick. So, who are you, and what might you be doing in my wardrobe? I assure you, it's not the finest place in the world, he added, with a wry grin, making Catherine giggle despite herself. Cat, she began, cutting herself off quickly with a cough. Telling him her name was Catherine would be a very obvious indicator that she was not in fact a boy. Just Cat, she finished, making the effort to deepen her voice somewhat. Letting her accent loosen, she couldn't go around speaking like a government brat. I just need to get away. The boy eyed her contemplatively. He looked about 16 or 17, she guessed, and the awkwardness about his long-limbed frame suggested a recent growth spurt. A faint ginger shadow graced his purple-smudged jaw. Well, just Cat, if that's what you want to call yourself, he said with a smirk, clearly aware that this wasn't a real name. You've succeeded. The ship is heading straight to Siberine. Is that far enough away for you? The collectors won't find you there, and you look the age just about. His piercing blue gaze traveled over her in a way that made her want to cross her arms over her chest. Are you going to leave me in Siberine? She queried, before she could stop herself, hating how scared she sounded. We might do. That's usually how it goes with the kids we smuggle out. Depends how entertaining you are, he answered, his smirk not faltering for a minute. I'll have to be at my wittiest then, shan't I? She replied easily, and he smiled. I think we're going to get along just fine, Brett. You can call me Fox. Are you going to be getting out of my wardrobe anytime soon? She shrugged. I don't know. It's rather comfortable in here. He let out a sharp bark of laughter, swinging a long leg over the chair and reaching out to grab her by her wrist, pulling her out of the wardrobe and onto her feet. He was a good head taller than she was, and this made her feel even more of a child than usual. Pausing, Fox eyed her appraisingly. You must be freezing in just a shirt. Here. Reaching into the wardrobe, he pulled a thick knitted jumper, tossing it at her. The dark blue wool was soft and well worn, and Cat didn't argue at the gift, pulling it over her head. It swamped her, and she had to roll her sleeves up 3 times just to see her hands. Blindly, you're a short one, he teased, making her blush. Leave off, she muttered in annoyance, ducking out from under his hand as he attempted to ruffle her hair. Oh, touchy. We'd better introduce you to the gaff. Make sure he lets you stay. He might toss you overboard like the last one. Fox turned to leave the room, and Catherine stared after him in alarm. You're joking, aren't you? You wouldn't really throw me overboard. That would be murder, she protested. She hadn't thought what might happen if the crew didn't let her stay. He chuckled as she chased after him. seeing that she had to take 2 quick steps for every one of his long strides. No, throwing you overboard would merely be displacing you from the ship. The water would do the murdering. Don't be such a brute, she told him with a scowl, which only made him chuckle harder. Lighten up, Shorty. You'll never survive if you take yourself so seriously. Where are you from anyway? It's not every day we get stows. Not even the bravest of little boys have the balls to dare escape collection. So what's your story? Forcing herself not to blush at his words, she shrugged. I guess I'm just braver than most, she replied evasively. She needed to think of a story before she could tell him anything. What could be believable? They scrambled up the ladder and Catherine stumbled as the ship rocked violently for a moment. The sudden movement didn't faze Fox, who braced himself easily against the lurching, then walked on. You'll get used to that, he assured her. So, what's the captain like? She asked curiously, quickening her pace to keep up. He's a decent sort. Bit loud at times, but he's a nice bloke. Been traveling since he was younger than me, he explained, pulling open a door to their left that Catherine knew from her earlier exploration led to the control room. There were 2 other men in the room now, who looked up at Catherine as Catherine and Fox entered. One seemed a little older than her father, she thought, in his late 30s perhaps. His hair was steely grey, and he had a neatly cropped beard covering his cheeks and chin. His brown double-breasted coat was done up to his throat with shining buckles, and a neat white shirt collar peeked over the top of it. A black leather hat was perched jauntily on his head. The other man, sitting at the wheel, was much younger, early 20s maybe, and somewhat baby-faced with a smooth jaw, marred only by a twisted scar on his left cheek, and honey blonde curls falling into his hazel eyes. I didn't know we had another crew member, he remarked quietly, one hand resting cautiously on the wheel. He looks a little young. The bearded man snorted, raising a bushy eyebrow at Fox. We don't, as far as I remember. Where'd you find this one, lad? He asked. My wardrobe. Seemed he managed to slip past those morons who were searching it. I thought I'd let you decide whether to throw him overboard or not, Fox replied calmly. The panic must have shown on Catherine's face because the older man laughed heartily. Don't scare the poor spong. He's petrified enough as it is. What's your name, kid? The man directed a warm smile towards Catherine, who smiled back unsurely. He calls himself Cat, Fox answered for her before she could speak. His skepticism clear. The blond man laughed, and the grey-haired man raised both eyebrows. First Fox, now Cat. What is this, a sudden menagerie? He muttered to himself, but didn't question her choosing a moniker. I'm Harry, lad, captain of the fine, kind ship, which I might add I don't remember giving you permission to board. He added with a stern look, better to ask forgiveness than permission. But you do best to tell me exactly why. I shouldn't get Ben here to turn the ship around and drop you right back in Anglia, where you presumably came from. Catherine's eyes widened in alarm as she took a step forward. Please, sir, don't take me back. I won't survive if I go back there. That was probably true. She was almost certain her father would kill her for running away if he ever set eyes on her again. I hear there's going to be another collection next week. Again. True, just not necessarily relevant to her. I won't be a bother if you let me stay. I'm a fast learner and I can work whatever you need me, even if it's scrubbing floors or feeding the furnace. Just don't take me back to Anglia. Catherine turned her shining grey eyes on the older man. His face softened and he sighed, rubbing at his beard. I suppose we can take on one more. We'll have to see how good you are around the ship, and the government won't miss one child his collection, will they? He mused. The weathered skin around his eyes crackling, but if you're not up to scratch, we'll let you go in submarine. There's no dead weight on this ship. Catherine beamed, fighting the temptation to hug the man in gratitude. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. Promise, she declared. Harry clapped her on the shoulder. That's the spirit, lad. He pulled a pocket watch from his coat. Not long until supper. Enough time for you to get cleaned up and shown around. He, he glazed over at the man at the wheel. This is Benny, by the way. Benedict Talbot. He's our pilot. Benedict gave her a small wave and reserved smile. Hi, he said, and she replied with a grin. Fox, show our new boy around, would you? Let him have the room two down from yours. I'll talk to the missus and try to persuade her another sprock and hurdles, and get her to change the bedding. He looked thoughtfully. I'll bet you don't have anything other than the clothes on your back, do you, Cat? Harry asked. She shook her head. She wouldn't tell him about the purse of money in her trousers. She didn't trust him enough for that yet. Well, we have plenty of Fox's clothes from when he was your age, and I'm sure they'll fit fine. I'll see if I can pursue Alice to dig them out. Go on then, Bretts, run. Don't let the new one get lost, Fox, he added sternly. I would never do such a thing, Fox replied, feigning outrage. Come on then, Cat, let's make this quick. I meant to be helping Matt with the engines. Catherine scurried after Fox as he hurried out of the control room. So, that was Ben and Harry, he said. You've only two others to meet. Matt, the engineer, and Alice, Harry's wife. Alice is a proper sweetheart. Be nice to her, or you'll get storms from Harry. Matt's a cheeky sod, but alright, you'll see. It's just the five of you? Catherine asked, surprised. I thought you need more people for a ship this size. From what she could remember, there were 30 crew members on each of the small government ships, and about 100 on the larger ones. Her father had once told her that some trade ships had up to 300 crew members, and were practically a small town in themselves. We probably do. We get by just fine though, Fox told her with a shrug. She wondered how long he had been on the ship. She didn't dare ask. However, maybe she'd try when they were a little friendlier with each other. This level is control and storage, she continued, and the trap topside. Level below is crew quarters, washroom, galley, and a bit more storage. Below that we've got more storage and the engines. That's where Matt and me spend most of our time. And bottom level is their storage. Catherine nodded, surprised that the ship this size had 4 levels. She'd only anticipated 3. So, what is this ship for? I can't imagine a pleasure ship with this much storage, and I definitely can't see you getting a permit. Pleasure permits were solely for the incredibly wealthy. Her father had one, but he rarely used it as he deemed traveling unnecessary. As far as he was concerned, everything important would come to him rather than the other way around. And if it didn't come to him, then it clearly wasn't important enough. Fox's lips twisted into devious smirks, and his eyes sparkled mischievously. Catherine unconsciously leaned closer, curious to know what could cause such amusement. Well, this is where things get interesting, Fox paused. Not that I should be telling you this until Alice gives you the okay, but you look like you can keep a secret. He raised the questioning eyebrows. Of course I can, Catherine said. What could they be hiding? Well, I suppose you'll figure it out sooner or later, he relented. As far as the government knows, we're fur traders, shipping from Seberine. With the storms getting more active over the past year or two, not many ships are willing to make the journey there, especially not the bigger trade ships. But we're small enough to nip around the bigger tornadoes. With Ben at the wheel, the man can't half fly, Fox said with no small amount of admiration in his voice. Catherine smiled. There were obviously strong bonds between the crew of the Storm Dancer. The storm's worsening was news to her, though. She'd never paid much attention to weather reports. She barely knew the difference between storm classifications, and the bigger ones hadn't come close to Anglia in years. And what do you do, really? She asked shrewdly. Fox grinned, turned wolfish. We may or may not fill the lowest level which doesn't exist in the ship's registered blueprints, with items monitored under rationing, and we may or may not happen to misplace those items among the needy of Anglia. Catherine stared at him, realization dawning. You're smugglers, she gasped. How did they get away with smuggling goods so blatantly? They tucked in the shitty shipyard and everything. Any problems with mildly illegal business? Fox asked, dropping down the narrow manhole, then stepping aside so Catherine could do the same. Because if so, we'll drop you off in Siberin and leave you to make your own way. You wouldn't be the first kid we've smuggled out, though it's usually because their parents ask us to. We don't usually keep them. He smiled wryly, and Catherine smiled back. No problems, Catherine resumed, the thicker accent and low-pitched tone she practiced on her excursion to the common areas of Brenningard. You're helping people, and that's an admirable thing. Most people I know are just happy to look after themselves. She thought of her father and his associates, who loved at the poor and hungry from the comfort of their grand homes. She hadn't been able to sit for days the one time she dared give a copper to a common girl, even younger than she was. How do you do it without getting caught, though? Aren't the guards meant to check every ship after it docks in before it leaves? Fox shrugged. Kid, 9 out of 10 guards in the Brenningard shipyard don't give a rat's ass about what we're smuggling. They're not even looking for goods. Their job is to stop anyone smuggling people. That's what they get their bonuses for. The smuggling we do is a lot easier than you think. It's just that most are too scared of the punishment to bother trying. The punishment for smuggling was either death or forced conscription, which tended to result in death in any case. And you aren't? She challenged, raising her eyebrows. He looked at her, a sort of sadness in his eyes masked with amusement. Why would I be scared of punishment? I know isn't likely to happen, he answered. It's like being scared of a storm that never comes. Music died. Bah. It has happened though. People have been executed for piracy plenty of times before, she argued. Well, for a start, we're not pirates. Pirates attack other ships, and those people were stupid. The key is to fade into the background, become part of the scenery. Don't give people a reason to question you being there, and they won't think you suspicious. Catherine conceded the point and frowned. Are there more of you? Smugglers, I mean? She imagined a whole network of people working beneath her father's nose, and she couldn't help but grin. It was just like one of her fantasy books. Lots of people bringing in goods to help during rationing. If there are, we haven't found any, Fox replied with a shrug, and they don't work the same areas we do. But Brenningard is a big city. For all we know, there could be dozens more. Good luck to them if there are, but either way, we work alone. He gave her a look that put an end to her questioning, though not to the thoughts racing through her mind, and they continued the tour. This is the washroom, and there's another one at the other end of the hall. Next door is the loo, and opposite is the linen cupboard. Next to that is my room, as you know. Catherine blushed as he pointed. As the pointed look Fox gave her. Over here's the galley, he told her, pushing against the thick oak door with his shoulders. They're immediately filled with the scent of food. We take all our meals in here, and you can usually find Alice in here. If not, she'll be next door in the laundry room. Stepping a little closer to Fox to peer through the open door, Catherine was surprised at the amount of space in the galley. With 2 long wooden tables, they could have easily seated about 20 people if they wanted to. There was a door at the back, and she assumed led to the kitchen. Do I get to meet Alice now? She asked. Fox grabbed her by the back of her collar, hoisting her into the corridor. Alice is not to be interrupted while cooking, except in the most dire of circumstances. Wait until supper, he told her. Fox shut the galley door behind him, leading her further down the hallway. That's a spare room, which is currently used for storage, and that's your new room, Fox declared as he pointed to the two doors beside his own. Keep it clean and don't attempt to put a lock on the door. Harry will have your hide, he added with a grimace. He pushed the door open, allowing her to stick her head in for a look. It was similar to Fox's room, just without all the clutter, and while it was drastically smaller than her room back home, she rather liked it. Brilliant! What about anybody else? She asked curiously. They're around the corner, Fox explained. She followed him down the U-shaped corridor, peering around at the four doors located there. Harry and Alice's room, other washroom, and Ben's room, and Matt's room. Stay out of here. They take shifts and sleep odd hours. So what will I be doing? You seem to have everything covered rather efficiently. Matt will keep you busy. We'll just have to hope you're good at things, I suppose, he teased, causing her to bristle in the front. I'm good at plenty, she insisted, making him laugh. I never said you weren't. Why don't you wash up and then knock on my door? I'll take you down to Matt. She nodded, and the pair of them doubled back into their own hallway. Fox stopped outside the door to the linen cupboard and nudged it open. Towels and bed sheets and things are in here. I'm afraid you'll have to stick with the clothes you're wearing until Alice finds you something. Gods, only know where she'd put my old things. He waited for her to grab a towel before shutting the door behind her. You've been here for a while then? She asked hesitantly. Wow. You could say that, he replied shortly, jaw clenched, and moved to pull open the washroom door. I'll see you when you're finished. Without waiting for her to say anything, he stalked off, his bedroom door slamming shut behind him. Catherine sighed. She hadn't meant to upset him. Shaking her hair, she trod the open door of the washroom, slid the lock into place, and turned to the large porcelain bath. As much as she wanted to have a long, luxurious soak, she knew Fox was waiting for her, so she took as little time as she could. Eventually she was dried and redressed. She rather enjoyed just being able to rub a towel over her now short hair and leave it. Tossing the towel into the hamper in the corner, she unlocked the door and hurried across to Fox's room, knocking hesitantly. Now you're looking less of a street rat and more of a human boy, he remarked as he opened the door, and she resisted the urge to laugh. If only he knew. Let's show you the rest of the ship then. He set off down the corridor and Catherine rushed to follow, half chugging at his side. You could slow down a bit, I've only got short legs, she complained. He snorted, reaching out to cuff her shoulders. Maybe keeping pace with me might make you grow a bit. How old are you anyway? 11? 12? He queried, eyeing her small frame. I'm 14, thank you very much. Almost 15, actually, she retorted. His eyebrows shot up. You're not seriously? He scoffed and laughed when she nodded. Plainly, you're a midget. You want to put on a bit of muscle soon. You won't be much good if you can't lift anything. No wonder you've not been collected yet. The government tended to stay away from scrawnier kids, waiting until they bulked up a bit. She wished she could reply that she was a perfectly acceptable height for her age and gender, but she stayed quiet, scowling in embarrassment. Fox seemed to realize that he'd gone too far and ceased his teasing. Carefully here, the ladder is a bit shaky, but it holds all right, he warned her as they reached the manhole. Nodding, she lowered herself slowly onto the steel ladder, gripping tightly as it swayed with her weight. Once they reached the ground, she immediately noticed the difference in temperature between the two floors. Humid air clung to her skin, drawing a thin layer of perspiration. She wiped a hand across her face, annoyed by the fact that Fox seemed unfazed by the heat, despite being dressed in both a tight long-sleeved shirt and leather waistcoat. The furnace must be around here then, she presumed, remembering the sweltering heat of the basement at home, where the burners were kept. And right you are. Everything to the left is storage, everything to the right is engines, he told her, rolling up his shirt sleeves as she pushed open the door. Oi, Matt, where are you hiding? We've got a new one, he called into the large, loud room. Steam hissed from pipes, the furnace roared quietly, and gears clanked and ground as they propelled the ship forward. Catherine had to duck as she walked, narrowly avoiding being hit on the head by a jutting piston. She heard the thunk of boots meeting metal and recognized the stranger walking towards them. He was the man who had been set on the boom earlier. New one? How in storms did we manage that? The man asked in surprise. His dark brown hair blistered to his forehead with sweat. Tyrium stains at his jaw and arms. He was dressed in a plain cotton undershirt, which was clinging to his muscular chest, and braces hung loosely from his waist. Catherine blushed despite herself. This man was built like a giant. Stowaway. Harry wants to keep him. Soft-hearted push over that he is. Figured you might be able to put him to use, Fox replied, grinning at the large man. Cat, this is Matthew. Matt keeps the ship airborne and running smoothly. Meet Cat. Storm's now his real name is, but that's all we're getting from him, he added, ignoring Catherine's call. You're a wee one, aren't you? Matt commented. Well, welcome aboard, I suppose. What can you do? Whatever you ask of me, said Catherine earnestly. I have some experience with basic household mechanics, but I'm a very fast learner, sir. Matt chuckled, amused at her enthusiasm. We'll see about that, Sprock, he told her. I suppose you'll more useful here than anywhere else on the ship. I'll take him from here, Fox, no worries. Fox nodded. Catherine felt alarmed at the thought of being left alone in the engine room with such a hulk of a man. Her trepidation must have shown on her face, for Fox laughed. He doesn't bite, Shorty. He'll look after you, and he'll see you at supper. Oh, I'll see you at supper. I was confused there for a sec. Lightly nudging Catherine's shoulder, he left the room by a door to the right. Catherine stared up at Matt. Despite his massive build, he had a friendly face with a chiseled jaw and thin goatee and striking green eyes that contrasted with his pale skin. He held out a hand and she took it, his calloused fingers drafting her slender hand. It's a pleasure, kid. Now come on, I'll show you the ropes before supper. He tucked her forward, and Catherine only had time for one brief thought. What on Tellus have I got myself into? And that was chapter 3. I'm just taking a look how tall chapter 4 is. Because we've gotten in quite a bit right now. Geez, where's the next one? We'll do one more chapter. Chapter 4. Catherine was startled out of her work when a loud bell rang through the room. She glanced up through her tinted safety goggles at Matt, who was just setting his wrench down. Food's waiting. Come on. Alice will have both our heads if we let the grub get cold. Matt told her, taking off his own goggles and reaching for the grey button-up shirt hanging on the pipe end. Catherine wiped her oil-stained fingers on her trousers. They hadn't been doing anything too difficult, just basic maintenance on the engines. With Matt showing her what things looked like when they were working perfectly and coming signs of something malfunctioning. She picked it all up quickly and was hooked already. She'd always been intrigued by machinery. Her father had lowered her interest in it because he felt it was beneath her station. But learning how several innocent-looking pieces of metal could be shaped and put together to create something complex was fascinating to her. Working on Samuel had been her only experience of mechanics, and it thrilled her to learn more. Letting Matt lead her back up to the galley, she hung back slightly when they reached the door. She had one crew member left to meet, and she had no doubt that if Harry's wife disagreed with her staying, she'd be out on her ear before she could say Anglia. Go on, lad. Alice is lovely, Matt urged, nudging her through the door. Everyone but Ben was already inside, and he looked up at the noise. Alice was standing at the head of the table, spooning a thick stew from a large tureen into bowls. She was a short, curvy woman, her blonde hair threaded liberally with grey and tied in a bun. Her warm blue eyes fixated on Catherine. By no means overweight, she was differently shaped from the painfully thin, tightly corseted woman of the government. She looked natural and homely, wearing a blue dress with ruffled skirts that swept the floor and a short brown jacket with large brass buttons. Catherine found herself instantly relaxing. You must be Kitten, Alice declared, her voice clear and friendly. Yes, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you, she said shyly. Matt and Harry broke into loud guffaws. I guess it's gas. What? Oh, hush up, both of you. There's nothing wrong with having a bit of manners, Alice scolded, hitting Harry sharply on the shoulder with the serving spoon. You just ignore them, cat, lad. They couldn't know politeness if it smacked them in the face. She walked around one of the long tables, her lace boots clinking on the waxed floorboards. You're an orphan, I presume, she asked. Something like that, replied Catherine, remembering Fox's own phrase. Alice frowned. No parents waiting who might be pleased to hear their little one has escaped collection? She peered down at Catherine, one hand resting on her waist. No, ma'am, no one's waiting for that, Catherine replied quickly, pleased not to have to tell a lie. Alice pursed her lips. One more mouth to feed won't kill us, I presume. I expect you'll work hard. By now she was addressing the crew. Matt nodded his head readily. It's been a good lad, Alice. It's good to have a sprock to scrabble under the narrower pipework. All right then, Alice agreed. Welcome aboard, Cat. We're on a tight ship and don't you forget it. I'm Alice. She smiled and reached out a soft hand. Unfortunately, shackled by marriage to this scoundrel, she jerked her thumb towards Harry, who faked an offended look. I can't say it'll be bad to have a sprock on the ship again. Now Fox is almost grown. She smothered a hand over Fox's messy red hair. He ducked out from under her hand, but his expression was fond. Just sit right there, dear, Alice prompted, setting a bowl at the empty space next to Fox. With a attentive glance towards him, Catherine slipped onto the bench. Alice poured from the bottle of mead for the rest of the crew and herself, and Catherine and Fox were given water. Jumping as a brass spoon was shoved in front of her face, Catherine took it from Fox's hand, smiling in thanks. Aren't we waiting for Ben? She inquired, looking around as everyone else dug in. He's still in the control room, Fox replied. Harry will relieve him after dinner. He'll grab his own food then. How did you and Matt get on? He asked quietly, shooting a glance towards the bulky man who was deep in conversation with Harry. He's great. I've learned so much already. I never knew there were so many small parts involved in keeping an engine running, she gushed. Fox laughed. So, you're enjoying yourself? Definitely. What were you up to? She asked curiously, spooning more stew into her mouth. Just stuff, Fox replied evasively. What do you think, Maddie? Can the sprock stay? Harry asked, his loud voice interrupting their conversation. Matt looked Catherine up and down, seeming to consider. Yeah, he's a sharp lad, fine by me. Catherine glowed with pride from the praise. Harry looked around the crew in turn. Alice shrugged, having already said her piece. Fox scolded. Well, I can't exactly say no now, can I? He pointed out. Come on, Fox. You know we're all run a bit thin on this ship. One more can't hurt, and it'll give you more time to work on your little projects. Yeah, it's fine by me, Fox smiled cheekily. Good to have someone younger to bully. Alice rolled her eyes. Well, that settles it. Welcome to the crew, Cat. Alice, love, would you dig out some of Fox's old clothes for him? Harry added. His wife smiled and nodded. Will do. They might still be a little big on them, though. Thank you. I'm sure they'll be fine, Catherine insisted. Where are you from anyway, Cat? Matt asked. Brandingard? Born and bred, she answered, hoping she could think quickly enough so as not to get caught in her own cover story. We assumed as much, but where specifically? Matt continued, holding his bowl out towards Alice with a hopeful look in his face. Just outside Greystone, Catherine told him. It was technically true. Greystone was the closest part of Common City to the government district she lived in. A lot of kids in Greystone were educated alongside government children. Ouch! Hard luck. No wonder you ran, Matt said sympathetically. Sympathetically? Wow. Words. Oof. Being the closest to the government district, Greystone barely had any children over the age of 13 due to the ease of collecting from there. Are you sure your parents won't miss you? He asked in a low voice, frowning. He clearly hadn't believed her earlier words. Catherine's smile vanished and her eyes fixed on her bowl. Like I told Alice, my parents aren't around, she said awkwardly. Fox patted her shoulder.
Merry Christmas!
Oof! Hiya, Scar. Hiya, Raiders. How are you all? We're just in the big story. So if you don't mind, I'll continue the story. Where was I? Catherine's smile vanished and her eyes fixed on her bowl. Like I told Alice, my parents aren't around, she said awkwardly. Fox patted her shoulders. Yes, well, that's always the story, he muttered quietly. Catherine wondered again what his story was. She looked over to include the rest of the crew. What about you? Where have you all come from? She asked. Well, Alice began, gazing at her husband. Harry and I met years ago in Muricus. I'm from there originally. I was 16, he was 17, and flying with his father. My parents owned an inn by the shipyard, and I was working behind the bar when Harry and his dad's crew rented rooms with us. I fell in love with him, and when he asked me to come with him, I couldn't say no. Her eyes shone at the memory, and Catherine smiled as the two kissed, their love obvious. I asked her to marry me as soon as it was respectable. Wasn't going to let her get away, Harry said. When my dad died, I inherited this little beauty, and we made it our home. Had a few issues when the war began. We lost half of our crew to the army, and the other half to their families. Wasn't so bad back under King Christopher's reign. God bless his soul. No rations, no need for us to smuggle. We carried supplies out to the soldiers in submarine, so it was easy for us to pass the storm barriers. When the monarchy went well, collections and rationing began, and we became a little less reputable. People were starving, and it felt wrong not to help. We picked up Fox about 6 years ago. Fox remained silent, unwilling to volunteer any further information. Penny a year later, Harry continued, and Matt followed within 6 months. Making enough of a crew to let the old boys go. Couldn't bear to be apart those two, he teased, elbowing Matt in the side. Benny and I grew up in Stratton, Matt explained in response to Catherine's confused look. We lived next door to each other, went to the same school, did everything together. I was doing an apprenticeship at Tinkerer's when Ben got the offer to fly for Harry and had to finish up my contract before I could leave and join him. Wasn't going to let him have all the adventures without me, was I? Catherine was impressed. Tinker's was a very prestigious mechanical company. Her father had shares in it. Its workers practically maintained the Docklands single-handedly now, though they were spread too thin to use their expertise on other things, such as the tram system. Matt must have been the best of the best to get an apprenticeship there. And you, Fox? She tried, turning to the freckled teen beside her. Fox's shoulder tensed, and he stood abruptly, not meeting Catherine's eyes. If you'll all excuse me, I got work to do before bed, he announced quietly, not waiting for a reply before leaving. The door swinging shut behind him. What did I say? Catherine asked, hurt. Alice reached over and patted her on the shoulder, offering a smile. Nothing, dear. Fox just doesn't like talking about himself. He's had a bit of a rough past, she confessed, making Catherine bite her lips. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, lad. That's why you were asking, Matt remarked. You wouldn't have asked if you had known it would set him off like that. He's might sensitive. That's our Fox. Catherine shrugged, still feeling guilty, but the movement was cut off by a yawn. Her belly full, it was finally beginning to hit her how tired she was. Suddenly, the thought of her new bed down the hall was all too inviting. If I'm excused, I think I'll head to bed. It's been a long day, she said ruefully, and Matt chuckled. Running away from Greystone and stowing on a skyship? I'll bet. Good night, Brett. I'll expect you down in the engines after breakfast. She nodded, standing. I'll be there. Thank you for the meal, Alice. It was lovely. Alice smiled at the compliment, piling Catherine's empty bowl on top of the others. You're very welcome, Puppet. Breakfast is at 7. There should be a clock in your room. Either way, Fox will wake you up if it's not still in that foul mood of his. Saying her good nights, Catherine left the galley, thankfully to have been accepted by at least most of the crew. Fox's door was firmly closed and while Catherine was tempted to knock, she didn't dare. Opening the door to her own new room, she sat down on the bed to unlace her boots, placing them neatly aside. She stowed her purse away in one of the desk drawers and turned to the bed. Not wanting to undress any further, she'd definitely give away her gender if one of the crew walked in on her in her undergarments. Sleeping in the clothes she'd been wearing all day might not be the most comfortable thing in the world, but she make do for one night. There was a grubby mirror bolted to her wardrobe door, and she took the chance to get a proper look at herself. Astonished at how much of a boy she looked with her hair cut short, it came down to just below the ears, a little longer than the current style, but nothing she hadn't seen on boys before. Fox was right though, she definitely looked closer to 12 than 14, and she didn't look like Catherine anymore. I look like Cat, she murmured, staring at her unfamiliar appearance. Slipping under the thick fur blankets she curled up tight on the comfortable mattress. Her brain racing, in just a few short hours she'd gone from Catherine Hunter, daughter of Nathaniel Hunter and future wife of Marcus Gale, to just Cat, Skyship Doc's buddy. She had to admit she preferred the later. Cat woke when the hand shook her shoulders. She blinked and squinted up at the face looming above her. She squawked as she realized Fox was standing over her bed, staring at her in amusement as she instinctively pulled the blankets up to her chin. Easy there, it's 6:30. I thought you might want to be up for breakfast. Also, Alice left these outside your room, held up a sack which Cat assumed was full of clothes. You'll get used to waking in the dark. If you had a proper porthole, you'd be getting sunrise at 4 in the morning, he remarked, gazing up at the small porthole in the wall over her desk, which glowed dimly with the morning light.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you for the follow. Cat crawled at the prospect of such an early hour, making Fox chuckle. I'll see you at breakfast. Don't take too long, or Matt will have eaten your serving. With that he left, the room becoming silently, save for the faint hiss of steam through the pipes in the wall, and the rhythmic chugging of the propeller, prompting her to realize her room was towards the stern of the ship. She dug through the sack of clothes. Clearly Fox's style hadn't changed much since he was her age. Small, coloured shirts, waistcoats, trousers, knitted jumpers, and buckled leather coats, and even a longer winter overcoat and a pair of sturdy knee-high boots, similar to the ones he wore now. She grinned to herself, imagined she'd look rather like his miniature when she was dressed, except for her brown hair, of course. She picked out some black trousers which were baggy on her, as well as a dark blue shirt and a black leather waistcoat. Buckling the heavy boots over sock-clad feet, Kat gave herself a once-over in the mirror to check she looked suitably boyish. It was odd not getting ready for worship at the end of the week. Did the crew even observe Anglican religion? Maybe she would ask sometime if she grew brave enough. She crossed the corridor to the galley, where the noise drifting from the open door told her she was the last one to arrive. Morning. Did you sleep well? Alice asked if she entered. I know most people can sleep when the ship rocks, but we had quite a smooth flight last night. We couldn't hit the Siberian storm barriers for another few days or so yet. Kat stretched her arms out as she sat, hearing her shoulders pop. Harry was absent, and Kat presumed he was on the shift. I slept like a log, thank you, thanks, she added gratefully as a bowl of porridge was placed in front of her. Reaching past Ben for a pot of honey on the table, she poured in a small amount and mixed the golden liquid into the thick porridge. Does it usually take so long to get to the barriers? Not usually, but we like to take our time. If we work too efficiently, the guards will start getting suspicious. Besides, Harry thought you might like a few days to settle in before we bring you into the business, Alice explained. Kat raised her eyebrows, pleased and surprised at their thoughtfulness. Ready for a hard day's work, Brock? Matt asked. Oh, always, she replied. That's the spirit. We got a little better the last trip, and some of the plates are sticking. Nothing serious, he added in response to Alice's worried look. We'll have it fixed, no problem. Ben, just do your best to keep us out of the worst of it if you can. Ben smiled, his brown eyes meeting Matt's gaze confidently. Sure, there's a relative clear path to the west that we should be able to squish through, if it's still around when we get there. Besides, when have you known me to fly us into a rough patch? Matt merely raised an eyebrow, bringing a faint flush to Ben's pale cheeks. Where are we going anyway? Kat blurted out without thinking. I mean, I know we're headed to Seberine, but how do you manage to smuggle goods in without being noticed? I know Seberine isn't particularly uninvolved in the war, but surely there are Anglian guards at every shipyard, she said. It was customary to have Anglian soldiers present in every country under Anglian rule to monitor trading. Her question earned a shared look from everyone in the crew, giving her the impression she was missing something. What? You'll learn when we get there. It'll be easier to explain then, Fox said from across the table. What will I learn? What's going on in Siberian? Matt smiled at her, somewhat apologetic. You'll see when we get there, Sprague. Just remember that things aren't always what they seem, and the newscasts don't always tell the whole truth. His statement only served to confuse Kat, who looked around the table for clarification. Let me put on the light. It's getting pretty dark. When they all stayed stone-faced under her gaze, she gave up and went back to eating the last of her porridge. "I better go and relieve Harry," Ben declared, getting up to his feet. "You coming then?" Matt asked with a glance at Cat. Standing, he leaned down to press a kiss to Alice's cheek. "Delicious as always, sweetheart. I'll see you for lunch." Alice stuttered. "You and your stomach, Matthew Wild," she muttered fondly. "Go on, the lot of you. You've got work to do. We need to have something to show for ourselves at Sivana." Cat followed Matt from the room and down the manhole to the floor below. "I'll start you off with the basics," Matt told her, leading her through the engine room. "Most of the steering system's parts are kept here." He gestured to a large gear plate with a clear glass casing right next to the furnace, and Cat almost groaned. She couldn't remove any more layers than she had already, or she'd give herself away, but the heat was sweltering. They connect to belts and run through the walls, from the struts of the wings to Ben's control panel. The propeller motors are over there. He pointed across the room, where Cat could see 4 large clock towers, one of which was rotating. Just taking a sip of drinky drink. "What do you do if one of the belts in the walls break?" she asked curiously. "Send a wee brat like you in the gasp to fix it," he retorted. "But surely I wouldn't fit." Her eyes widened, making him chuckle. "Calm down, Brett. I'm only joking." Matt rolled his eyes, amused. "You Greystone lot are an odd bunch, always taking things so seriously." Cat tried to look offended at his words. With any luck, her so-called Greystone background would account for any other oddities they might notice. Most folk thought people from Greystone were strange, in an odd limbo between the commoners and the government. She heard a creak as Fox walked through the door. Unbuttoning his waistcoat, he tapped it over a low-hanging pipe, rolling his flared sleeves up to his elbows. Matt was grinning. "Come to give us a hand, Fox? Better than sitting around doing sod all, I suppose." "Yeah," Fox agreed, moving to the stand beside Cat. "But why don't we let the Sprague give it a go? See how good he is." Kath huffled at the raised eyebrows Fox directed at her, her eyes slipping to the small triangle of exposed skin at the base of his throat. "He's good enough," Matt assured Fox. "But go on then, Cat. See if you can find the problem." He handed her the screwdriver. Sweating uncomfortably, she turned to the encased gear plate. First he unhooked the casing, eye-scanning the ordered entanglement of cogs, sprockets and chains. Before she could get too engrossed, she was startled by a loud metallic clang, followed by a short bark of laughter. When she turned, Matt was rubbing his forehead and scowling at the steam pipe, protruding a few inches from the ceiling. "Every bloody time," he grumbled, and Cat suppressed a laugh, meeting Fox's amused gaze. "You'll get used to that," he told her. 5 years, and Matt still can't remember which parts are lower than others." Cat smiled at Matt's sheepishly look and turned back at her work. At first everything seemed to be working normally, until she noticed a stretched link on one of the chains, which caused a bit of jarring when it passed between 2 gears. "You need to change that chain. Is there a replacement in here or next door?" she asked, turning her head. She was surprised to see that Fox had stripped to his undershirt and was working on tightening an overhead piston. Her cheeks flushed and she tried to ignore the sight of his tense biceps. She felt a strange sensation in her stomach, which was quickly replaced by a feeling of dread. She heard other girls talk about that type of feeling at the government school she attended, and in her current situation it didn't bode well. No, she decided, this was just not the time. She had to act like a boy. "Nice eye, lad," Matt said, rummaging in a box and handing her the correct chain, clearly unaware of her current dilemma. "You'll have to be quick about it, though. We can't have the steering offline for more than a few seconds." "No pressure or anything," Fox piped piped up Riley, running her hopes of ignoring him. Oh, ruining her hopes for ignoring him. Cat turned back to the gear plate, staring at the chain. It was awfully long, and the top was hooked to a gear very high up. I'm not sure if I can read, she admitted, standing on tiptoe and stretching up to test. I'll give you a hand, Shorty, Fox assured her. She bit her lips as he stepped closer, taking one end of the chain from her hands. The heat in the room seemed to increase tenfold as Fox leaned over her, reaching the gear easily. On three, he murmured, fingers poised and ready. 1, 2, 3. On the last count, Cat quickly unhooked the chain from its cock, waiting 2 beats before looping the new tightly in place and clipping the 2 ends together before the chain could tangle. She stepped back in satisfaction, nearly colliding with Fox, the redhead, squeezing her shoulder. Easy does it, Brad. Not bad, though. Let's see how you do with some of the more complicated pieces. As he turned, he wiped a hand across his forehead, pulled his undershirt off, and dropped it to the floor to join his shirt and waistcoat. Cat's cheeks turned a fiery red upon seeing his bare chest, and resisted the urge to groan. She'd never been attracted to anyone before. Why did it have to start now? And that was chapter 4, and with that we'll leave it at that, 'cause it's already been 2 hours. Oof. So that were the first 4 chapters of Taking to the Skies. Or actually Take Back the Skies. And my throat is sore, slowly getting to a point where it's like, please give me some liquid, give me drinky drinks. I hope it was comfy enough to listen to me. Pretty sure I made quite a few mistakes in the book. If people enjoyed it though, we can continue this story at the next, well, not tomorrow, but next week at a stream. I can try to plan it in if people enjoyed it. Let me book a bookmark in here. You always want more, Rosie. You've been pestering me to read you the story for forever. I'll continue with this bookie like next stream. For now, I want to thank you all though for stepping by and rating and following and for Miharu for her subscription. Let's see if we can actually rate somebody. Let's send you guys over to. It's been ages. We can rate Mystical Scion. How did this work again? We could do more story times next week. Like at least we can do story times until we finish the book. But we're gonna take our time with it. Like we're gonna do one each week then. After we'll see after that. For now we're just gonna have possibly 4 streams a week. We'll do one stream where we'll continue the story and we'll have 3 with games and other stuff. It seems like a good idea. So for now I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm gonna send you over to Mystical Scion, who is playing Surviving Mars, which is a pretty cool game. So let's send some love to him. Let's be the good little protocols in drones and send him some love. I'll be back tomorrow and we'll play a game. We'll be starting at the same time as today, so it's 8 p.m. GMT plus 2. And we'll probably play some Rose Online, either that or Satisfactory. I'll just have some fun, some relaxed time. We can talk some. I'll just enjoy the thingy. Now, let's go read Cyan. Thank you all, and I'll see you hopefully tomorrow. And if not, then I'll see you around. Thanks for staying and bye byes.